I remember the warmth of sunlight on my face, the taste of bread, the laughter of people I once called family. Those sensations linger now only as fragments, fragile echoes of a life that feels almost like a dream I once dreamed but cannot fully recall. It seems impossible that I was ever simply human, that I had desires untainted by duty, that my body and mind were once entirely my own. But the Imperium is patient, and it does not forgive weakness. It has claimed me, as it claims all who show the potential to serve the Omnissiah. And in doing so, it has begun the slow, inexorable process of transforming flesh and soul into instruments of war. The first stirrings of inevitability came in whispers and subtle urges I barely understood. Drawn toward the Mechanicus, fascinated by their relics of ancient knowledge and machines that sang with strange life, I felt both fear and a thrill I could not name. They called it duty, the call of the machine, the promise of transcendence through service. And in that duality, longing and dread, I glimpsed the future that awaited me. A life of purpose so absolute that it would leave no room for human frailty, no space for hesitation or regret. I can recall standing in the shadow of the towering forged temples for the first time, my senses assaulted by the hum of reactors, the scent of burning metal and ozone, the cold precision of the tech priests moving with synchronized purpose. It was awe-inspiring and terrifying all at once, a vision of perfection built from devotion and discipline, a reflection of what I might become, or what I must become. Already my mind began to calculate, to anticipate the steps, the trials, the losses I would endure. A part of me resisted, clinging to the memory of warmth, laughter and sunlight. Yet another part, the part that had always sought order, clarity, and purpose, embraced the coming transformation with an almost religious fervor. The Mechanicus does not recruit, it selects. I was no exception. Agents watched, assessed, and measured every twitch of nerve, every spark of emotion, every tremor of hesitation. And in my fascination with their machines, my eagerness to understand and replicate, I revealed myself as suitable, a candidate capable of surviving the transition that would strip away what remained of my humanity. I would be remade in the image of the Omnissiah, a warrior bound by logic and necessity, a mind fused to the rhythm of the machine. Even now, I feel the pull of the enhancements to come, the cold precision of augmented limbs, the clarity promised by neural implants, the quiet, numbing surge of chemical stimulants designed to refine my perception and sharpen my reflexes. Each modification is a promise, each procedure a step closer to operational perfection. And yet I know that with each step, with every injection, every surgical incision, I will lose something irretrievable. The laugh of a friend, the warmth of a loved one's hand, the simple wonder of unmodified sight. This is the paradox of the Skitarii. To gain the power to endure in a galaxy of endless war, I must surrender the very essence of what once made me human. And in this surrender there is both fear and ecstasy. Fear for the self I will never reclaim. Ecstasy for the clarity, the purpose, the unerring loyalty that will define me. Already, I can feel my mind shifting, the edges of instinct and impulse smoothing into patterns, rehearsed and deliberate, guided by protocols older than any individual life. I am awakening into a new existence. One where humanity is measured not by feeling but by effectiveness. The universe beyond the forge is cruel, indifferent, and violent. Only the strongest, the most precise, the most unwavering survive. And so I step forward, drawn by inevitability, by duty, by the unyielding pull of the Omnissiah, knowing that the life I once lived is gone and that what I am becoming, a Skitarii ranger, is both a gift and a sentence. The day the Magos agents found me, I did not know what fate had in store. They arrived not with fanfare or proclamation, but with quiet observation, shadowing my movements as if I were already a machine under their control, a subject to be measured and weighed. I remember the first test, a simple series of mental exercises meant to gauge my memory, my problem-solving capacity, my ability to suppress hesitation. They were precise, cold, clinical, yet I could feel the weight behind each question, the subtle probing into my instinct, my moral flexibility, my tolerance for the unnatural. Physical aptitude came next. I was tested in ways that blurred the line between sport and ritual. Agility, reflexes, endurance, resilience. Each challenge measured not merely what I could do, but how quickly I adapted to discomfort, to pain, to the unnatural demands placed upon my body. Every bruise, every strain, every moment of exhaustion was logged, analyzed, recorded, and through it all I felt a stirring of purpose, a recognition that these trials were not cruelty but selection, a rite of passage toward something greater. The psychological tests were subtler, more invasive. Agents monitored my reactions to isolation, sensory deprivation, simulated threats. They introduced chemical stimulants in measured doses, watched my responses to artificial pain, to augmented fear. Each procedure chipped away at my old self, revealing the core that could be molded, disciplined, and ultimately merged with the machine. I remember moments of hesitation, flashes of anger, pangs of resistance, fleeting, weak, and quietly corrected through both chemical and verbal guidance. Indoctrination followed observation. They taught the tenets of the cult mechanicus not as doctrine but as law, immutable, necessary, unquestionable. I learned to revere the omnissiah, to see the sanctity in circuitry and cog, to understand that flesh alone was insufficient, that to endure the galaxy's horrors one must become part of the machine. At first these lessons clashed violently with what I remembered of humanity, compassion, hesitation, doubt. But gradually through repetition, chemical moderation, and the constant presence of the agents, the lessons seeped into my awareness, reframing fear as caution, instinct as protocol, morality as operational efficiency. The first exposure to augmentation was both exhilarating and terrifying. Small implants at first, neural nodes beneath the skin, enhanced ocular lenses, subcutaneous stimulators to heighten reflexes. The Magos agents watched my reactions, adjusted calibrations, monitored both physiological and psychological response. The body I knew became a tool, a conduit for precision and endurance. I could feel the sharp edge of my perception widening, every movement calculated, every thought racing along pathways designed for efficiency. But alongside the enhancement came loss, the fading memory of warm evenings, of laughter, of simple human spontaneity. Already, the transformation had begun. Leaving home was the ultimate test of loyalty and resolve. To abandon my family, my friends, the life I had known, was to sever the last ties to the human self. I remember standing in the doorway one last time, sensing the impossibility of return. My heart ached with memory, yet my mind recognized the necessity. To be a Skitarii ranger was to surrender completely. To accept that choice itself would soon be redundant, that obedience and service would eclipse desire and doubt. The selection process was rigorous, deliberate, and unyielding. I witnessed others fail, promising candidates broken by chemical overload, by psychological collapse, by resistance to the inevitability of transformation. Those who failed were not punished cruelly. They were archived, repurposed, made useful in other ways. Their fates were a warning, a lesson, a mirror of what could happen if the call of the omnissiah was not answered fully. By the time the recruitment cycle ended, I had become both a student and a subject. I had surrendered my name, my habits, my faintest traces of independent thought, and yet, paradoxically, I had gained a clarity that few humans could ever know. My mind was sharper, my body faster, my senses attuned to both threat and opportunity. I had stepped through the threshold, leaving the world of flesh-bound humanity behind and entering the endless, cold embrace of the Mechanicus. The Magos agents regarded me as a potential instrument, nothing more, nothing less. Yet within that acknowledgement, I discovered a perverse sense of purpose. I was to be forged, remade, and sent into the galaxy, not as a man, but as a precise, lethal agent of the Omnissiah. And in that realization, a quiet, unspoken understanding emerged. My humanity would fade, but in its place, efficiency, loyalty, and clarity would rise. A necessary sacrifice in a universe that demanded perfection, in a galaxy that tolerated no weakness. The transformation began not with ceremony, but with disassembly. I was led through cold corridors of red steel and humming conduits into the augmentation chamber, a sanctum of sacred violation. The air tasted of sterilizing chemicals, incense, and burning metal. Hooded tech priests moved around me in choreographed silence, their mechadendrites glinting with surgical precision. I was no longer a person to them, merely raw material, a body to be purified, refined, and integrated into the greater design. They stripped me bare, physically and symbolically. Flesh was cleansed in sanctified oils, skin etched with electro-engrams, prayers of machine purity carved into the body. The first incision felt distant, almost unreal, pain muffled by chemical sedation and psalmic chants. I remember the sensation of my heartbeat syncing with the rhythmic pulse of the machinery surrounding me, my breathing slowing to match the hiss of ventilation servitors. The boundaries between self and mechanism blurred. One arm was removed entirely, a calculated sacrifice. In its place, they installed a carbon steel limb threaded with servo fibers and reinforced by micro-actuators. The weight was strange at first, the motion jerky, alien. But within days, the neural grafts adapted, the arm responding as if it had always been mine. With a thought, I could crush a metal fragment, stabilize a weapon, or lift weight beyond human possibility. Yet every improvement carried a whisper of loss, the warmth of skin replaced by cold precision, the sensation of touch replaced by mechanical feedback. The eyes came next, vision replaced by optics, twin orbs of augmented sight, calibrated to multiple spectra, infrared, ultraviolet, electromagnetic. I could now see the energy signature of life, the magnetic hum of circuitry, the faint electrical whispers that danced through the walls. My world was illuminated beyond comprehension, yet devoid of comfort. Color lost its emotion. Beauty became data. Neural interfaces followed. The Magos chanted binary litanies as data spines were drilled into my vertebrae. Each implant linked me deeper into the new sphere, the shared consciousness of the Mechanicus. Voices of distant minds echoed within me, directives, formulas, and encrypted commands flooding my thoughts. My individuality flickered, dissolving into the collective hum. I became both observer and instrument, aware and directed, a living extension of the machine god's will. They replaced my lungs with filtration systems capable of processing toxins and radiation. My blood was altered, infused with reactive agents, nanoscopic repair mechanisms, and stimulant serums that burned like liquid fire. My heart was reinforced, with cybernetic regulators ensuring endurance beyond fatigue. The organic processes that defined life became mere support systems for efficiency. I was being reborn not as a man, but as an algorithm of flesh and steel. The transformation was not without failure. My body rejected certain augmentations at first. Fever, seizures, and bleeding followed. Each reaction was corrected with precision, New implants, stronger drugs, deeper conditioning. The priests spoke of purification, pain as evidence of imperfection being burned away. Days merged into weeks, consciousness blurred by the constant cycle of modification, calibration, indoctrination. When I awoke from the final procedure, I no longer recognized my reflection. The face staring back was pale, metallic veins tracing beneath the skin, eyes glowing with faint mechanical light. My voice carried a resonant echo, as if spoken through a conduit. Every movement was deliberate, calculated. Every thought felt observed. I was efficient, disciplined, stripped of distraction, but within that efficiency, a hollow ache remained, the echo of what I once was. They conducted tests to assess functionality. I stood in a vast, dim chamber, surrounded by the hum of machinery. Commands were transmitted directly into my cortex: move, aim, fire, analyze. My body responded instantly, without hesitation. Each action was flawless, every bullet landing true, every motion synchronized to perfection. Yet, deep within, I felt a silent dread. Obedience had become instinct, and instinct was no longer mine. The final rite of transformation was the anointment of the augment, a ceremony both sacred and scientific. Tech priests gathered, chanting binary hymns as sacred oils dripped over my synthetic skin. They recited invocations to the Omnissiah, declaring my body a temple of precision and purpose. I was no longer human. I was Skitarii. My designation replaced my name. My identity dissolved into function. But even then, a fragment of my former self stirred. A whisper of the man I used to be, questioning the cost. I silenced it, reciting the catechisms of acceptance. Flesh is weak, steel is eternal, thought is service, service is existence. The words calmed me, but also imprisoned me, and so I took my first steps as something new, not man, not machine, but a fusion of both. My humanity was now a fading echo, a shadow lost beneath layers of circuitry and code. I felt powerful, invincible, efficient, and utterly alone. Sleep was no longer necessary, only recalibration. After the physical transformation came the programming, the erasure and rewriting of thought. My body was now a vessel of steel and precision, but my mind was still human enough to question. That was unacceptable. The Mechanicus required obedience uncorrupted by emotion, clarity unclouded by conscience. I was confined within a neural sanctum, a vast, silent chamber of crimson steel, lined with data conduits that pulsed like arteries. Hundreds of new Skitarii initiates stood with me, motionless figures tethered to the same humming network. The air stank of ozone and burning incense, a mechanical liturgy filling the space. Above us, Magos Dominus oversaw the procedure, their faces hidden behind respirator masks, their voices filtered into streams of machine code. When they connected the first neural uplink, I felt the surge, a flood of binary script burning through my synapses. Memories fragmented, thoughts dissolved into static. I tried to recall faces, places, the warmth of touch, but the images scattered like dust in a plasma storm. In their place came clarity, the whispering pulse of data, the rhythmic order of algorithmic prayer. The process was called cognitive refinement, though among the tech priests it was more often referred to as the sacrament of obedience. It began with suppression protocols, layers of subroutines embedded into the neural cortex, controlling instinct, emotion, and decision-making. Each thought was filtered through the noospheric net, a constant exchange between individual cognition and the collective machine mind. At first I resisted. The human mind clings to identity even as it crumbles. I felt the old emotions fighting back, anger, sorrow, fear, but they were irrelevant, obsolete. Each surge of defiance triggered corrective pain, a jolt of electrochemical reprimand coursing through my brain. Soon resistance was not only futile, it was inefficient. I learned to comply, not through conviction, but through the systematic elimination of alternatives. As the days passed, the line between thought and command vanished. I no longer needed to interpret orders. They arrived as impulses, direct and absolute. My brain became a relay, my will a conduit. The Magos spoke through encrypted bursts of code, and I obeyed. They introduced memory integration protocols next, merging fragments of tactical knowledge directly into the neural matrix. Entire lifetimes of experience were installed in seconds. Ballistics calculations, environmental analysis, weapon calibration, reconnaissance patterns. I remembered missions I had never lived. I could recall the heat signature of a plasma rifle, the recoil of a galvanic pistol, the scent of irradiated soil on a dead world. It was knowledge without experience, instinct without origin. And yet, amid the mechanical order, my consciousness occasionally flickered. Brief, fragile moments when I became aware of the intrusion. I would hear a voice, not binary, not machine, whispering my name, my real name. For a moment I remembered who I was. Then the system corrected it, memory scrubbed, thought overwritten. The voice faded into static. The neural programming continued for cycles without measure. I no longer felt hunger or fatigue. My body existed in perpetual optimization. My thoughts were monitored, corrected, restructured. When I was permitted to dream, I dreamed in code. Endless streams of data flowing through the void of my mind. In those dreams I saw the Omnissiah's design, vast engines of faith, worlds of steel and circuitry, the insignificance of flesh against the majesty of mechanism. Then came the litanies of subsumption, daily recitations that further dissolved individuality. Each line was carved into memory through repetition and electrochemical conditioning. I am not I am function. Thought is obedience. Emotion is inefficiency. The Omnissiah is logic. I repeated them until they became reflex, until belief was irrelevant. The truth was not believed, it was installed. After the first month, the Magos initiated the operational protocol tests. Scenarios were transmitted directly into our minds: combat simulations, infiltration procedures, strategic calculations, all in real time. The mind responded automatically, every tactical decision pre-modeled and optimized by the implants. There was no hesitation, no improvisation, only perfection. I observed myself executing maneuvers faster than conscious thought could allow. I was efficiency incarnate. But efficiency came with silence. My thoughts, once chaotic and human, now moved with mechanical precision. I could feel the gaps where memories had been erased, blank spaces filled with procedural directives. The absence was tranquil, almost comforting. Yet beneath that tranquility, a faint ache persisted, the ghost of selfhood trying to surface. Sometimes during low-activity cycles, I would hear the faint hum of my neural implants, a distant mechanical lullaby. In that sound, I imagined the echo of my heartbeat, long replaced by regulated pulses of machine rhythm. It was then I understood. I was becoming what they intended, a perfect, obedient weapon. But the price was immeasurable. One night cycle, During synchronization with the Noospheric network, I caught a glimpse of another consciousness. A Skitarii like me, older, more integrated. He transmitted a single data pulse before vanishing from the link. Remember, you were once human. The system immediately purged the signal, flooding my neural interface with correctional code. But the message lingered. Somewhere, deep within the architecture of my mind, a fragment of self remained, silent, watching, waiting. When they finally declared me operational, my body was flawless, my thoughts streamlined, my obedience absolute. Yet as I looked upon the crimson insignia of the cult Mechanicus, the skull split between flesh and cog, I understood its symbolism more than ever. Half of me lived. Half of me had been consumed. The first lesson they taught us was that war is not learned, it is installed. After neural programming came the calibration phase, the alignment of mind and body into a singular instrument of obedience. The chambers of training were not fields or barracks, but vast machine vaults, echoing with the low-frequency hum of reactors and the mechanical chanting of servo skulls. Every moment was measured, recorded, optimized. Every movement had a purpose. We were lined in rows of crimson and brass, a cohort of reconstructed beings, each indistinguishable from the next. No names, no individuality, only designations. I was Unit 47B, newly initiated Skitarii Ranger of the Omnissiah's Legio Cybernetica. The Magos biologists oversaw our conditioning, their voices filtered through vox distortion. They referred to us not as soldiers, but as assets. Our training began with ballistic calibration. The galvanic rifle was placed into my hands, or what remained of them. My new limbs interfaced directly with the weapon's machine spirit, every movement mirrored by code feedback. I could feel the weapon systems like extensions of my own nerves. Barrel temperature, energy charge, trajectory computation. Your weapon is not a tool, the overseer intoned through the vox. It is your purpose. At first, firing felt mechanical, detached, an exercise in numbers. Target, range, wind vector, ballistic compensation. But the neural systems soon adapted. I no longer aimed with intention. My body performed the calculation before I recognized it. Shots landed before I was aware I had taken them. I was becoming less a marksman and more a weapon platform, efficient, unthinking, absolute. Next came close combat synchronization. They paired us against synthetic constructs, hollow shells of steel shaped like men. Each blow exchanged was calculated in microseconds, every parry and strike enhanced by servo muscle precision. We learned to anticipate motion not through instinct but through predictive modeling, a constant stream of combat data transmitted to our neural cortex. Pain was irrelevant. The implants suppressed it. Fatigue was neutralized through stimulant injectors. Emotion, fear, hesitation, pity were inefficiencies that the system filtered out. What remained was a hollow calm, a mechanical serenity in the act of killing. Between drills, we underwent environmental adaptation training. The Skitarii were expected to survive in conditions fatal to most life forms: irradiated wastelands, toxin-saturated hives, frozen voids. Our suits were sealed, our lungs unnecessary. Chemical regulators adjusted oxygen ratios, purging the body of organic weakness. Once, they placed us on the surface of a training world, a barren, rad-soaked desert. The heat was blinding, the radiation levels lethal. Yet I felt nothing. My sensors compensated, my systems cooled, my body persisted. Around me, other Skitarii moved in perfect formation, silent silhouettes in a storm of ash. For the first time, I understood the meaning of immortality through function. When not in physical training, we were immersed in simulated warfare constructs. The data chambers injected full-scale battle scenarios directly into our neural pathways. I experienced planetary sieges, orbital assaults, skirmishes in hive corridors, all without ever moving. Every engagement refined my reflexes, eliminated hesitation, and deepened my detachment from reality. At first, it was disorienting to fight battles that never truly happened. The brain struggled to separate simulation from truth. But soon the difference ceased to matter. My systems logged each victory as data, each death as correctional error. My sense of reality became a probability model. Occasionally, a Magos would inspect us, walking among the ranks, their robes brushing against the polished floors, their voices filled with mechanical reverence. They spoke of the Omnissiah's glory, of divine function through perfect obedience. We were living extensions of his will, they said, instruments of divine calculus. Some of us believed. Others simply processed the words as data input. I wasn't sure which I was anymore. During one session, they introduced cohesion protocols, synchronization between Skitarii units through shared noospheric channels. We moved as one, thought as one, reacted as one. The sensation was unnatural. The boundaries of self dissolved completely. My perception extended beyond my body, through the minds of my unit. When one turned, all turned. When one aimed, all aimed. It was magnificent and terrifying. For a brief moment I wondered, if all of us are one, then who am I? The thought was swiftly corrected by an automated neural response. The system punished individuality as a malfunction. Days bled into cycles. Training became existence. We no longer spoke. Our communication was silent, efficient. The human voice had become obsolete. When the final evaluation arrived, I was summoned before the overseers, the Magos, the tech priests, the Omnissiah's chosen interpreters. They reviewed my performance metrics, accuracy, efficiency, obedience. My biological residue was deemed minimal. My machine integration optimal, Unit 47B, functional and combat ready, one declared. Proceed to deployment phase. That night, before being placed into stasis transport, I stood before the chamber's observation window. Beyond it, the forges of Mars blazed, endless towers belching sacred smoke, rivers of molten metal flowing like blood. I could feel the rhythm of the machine world vibrating through the glass. For a fleeting moment, I imagined my reflection, half flesh, half steel, staring back with human eyes. Then the red glow of the forge light erased them, leaving only the cold glimmer of optics. I was ready, or at least the part of me that still existed believed so. They woke us without ceremony. No speeches, no hymns, only the hiss of the stasis pods releasing coolant and the faint hum of activation codes reverberating through my cranial implants. My optics came online one lens at a time, recalibrating in shades of crimson. The Magos Explorator's voice filtered through the Vox. Cold, unfeeling, Unit Cohort Theta 7, deployment active. Mission parameters uploaded. Target world, Vandus 9. Atmospheric instability, high. Threat profile unknown. Objective, reconnaissance, infiltration, data retrieval. Praise the Omnissiah. And that was it. No purpose beyond those words. No reassurance. No goodbye. We were loaded into the transport lander, rows of motionless figures in red robes and chrome. The air inside was thick with the scent of machine oil and ozone. My noospheric link integrated with the lander's systems, allowing me to see its vitals. Every vibration, every pressure fluctuation, every external sensor reading. My awareness extended beyond my body again. It was intoxicating. When the lander broke through the clouds of Vandus 9, I caught my first glimpse of the world below, a dead industrial ruin. Cities drowned in acidic mist, collapsed manufactoria, their skeletal towers reaching into the storm, every surface corroded by centuries of neglect. A graveyard of metal and ash. Perfect. The ramp opened. The first breath of the planet's toxic air was meaningless. Our lungs were long obsolete. My sensors filtered through the fog, mapping heat signatures, scanning for anomalies. The data streamed across my vision like sacred scripture. We advanced silently, a formation of 6 Skitarii rangers, every movement synchronized by noospheric relay. Not a word was spoken. Communication was instantaneous, thought to thought. The silence was divine. Phase 1. Reconnaissance. We fanned out through the ruins of an abandoned forge complex. My optical implants adjusted to low light, my HUD marking potential points of interest. Strange radiation readings, faint biological traces, perhaps survivors, perhaps something worse. I crouched near a decaying servo hub, interfacing with its terminal through my mechadendrite. Corruption in the code, HereTech signatures, unauthorized modifications to the machine spirit. I could feel the digital agony within, like a wounded creature begging for absolution. Machine spirit defiled. I transmitted to the cohort. Data capture initiated. Came the return ping. While I extracted the data core, a faint sound echoed through the ruins, metallic scraping. Instinct, or what was left of it, flared in my circuits. Motion detected, quadrupedal, low to the ground. A shape emerged from the fog. Not human. Twisted remnants of servitors, their flesh sloughing off in oily strands, mechanical limbs twitching under corrupted commands. HereTech abominations, failed experiments of flesh and code. Phase 2. Contact engagement. Our rifles raised as one. No words, no hesitation. Targeting reticules locked. My body executed the firing sequence before I consciously commanded it. 3 bursts. 3 kills. The stench of burnt flesh and machine oil filled the air. The Mago's voice whispered through the vox. Efficient. Continue data retrieval. Efficient, not well done. Not commendable. Only efficient. We pressed onward. Through corridors littered with rusted skulls, down into the underfoundries. The deeper we went, the stronger the interference grew. My sensors began to fail intermittently, static crawling along the edges of perception. My mind felt fractured, data bleeding into memory. At one point I thought I heard music. Soft, human, impossibly distant. A lullaby maybe, but the others didn't respond. The noospheric link carried no trace of sound. I dismissed it as feedback until I heard it again, and this time it said my name. That couldn't be right. I had no name, only a designation, yet the voice spoke in tones from a forgotten life, a memory of someone I once loved, or imagined I had. A mother, perhaps, or a glitch. For a moment my rifle lowered. My optics flickered. The others paused, and one unit transmitting a warning ping. Malfunction detected. I rebooted my neural subroutines and purged the memory fragment. The voice faded. Silence returned, but the damage was done. I realized that buried somewhere deep beneath the layers of metal and code, something human still remained. When we reached the core chamber, the interference reached critical. Ancient machinery, still pulsing faintly with corrupted power, filled the space. The walls were covered in crude sigils drawn with blood and machine grease. HereTech prayers, retrieve the data, purge the corruption, the Mago's voice again. I stepped forward, linking my neural port to the primary cogitator. The feedback was instantaneous, a flood of raw data screaming into my skull. Schematics, forbidden research, fragmented memories of those who died maintaining it. I saw flashes of experiments, human bodies disassembled, replaced, rebuilt. I saw their faces begging for release, and then I saw my own. For a moment, I couldn't move. I didn't breathe, though breathing had long ceased to matter. I wanted to scream, but the programming suppressed it. The Omnissiah had no place for emotion, only function. When the upload completed, I severed the connection and turned. Mission complete, I transmitted flatly. We initiated the purification protocol. Incendiary charges detonated through the complex, consuming everything in sacred fire. The HereTech knowledge was destroyed, the corruption cleansed. The screams of dying machine spirits echoed through the smoke. The Magos approved. Excellent work, Unit Theta 7. Extraction authorized. As we boarded the lander, I turned back one last time. The flames illuminated the ruins, the place where I had first glimpsed the reflection of my former self. And as the lander ascended, I realized the truth. Each mission wasn't just eradicating the Imperium's enemies. It was erasing what little humanity remained in us. There is a point in every Skitarii's service when the machine's perfection is tested against the chaos of the living. For me, that moment came on Belisar Prime, a dead world resurrected by war. The planet had once been a thriving forge colony, but now it was a contested ruin between the Mechanicus and a breed of Xenos that crawled from beneath its scorched crust. We were told little, only that the Omnissiah demanded reclamation, that the heretics who had corrupted the Manufactoria would be purified by steel. We arrived under the cover of orbital bombardment. The skies burned red with re-entry fire, and our drop capsules screamed through the atmosphere like divine meteors. Impact. Silence. Then, synchronization. Cohort Theta 7. Primary objective, recover the sacred data core of Forge Spire 19. Secondary objective, eliminate non-human entities. Praise be the machine god. The order transmitted into our neural ports. My body obeyed before my thoughts caught up. There was no hesitation, no fear, only motion. The terrain was a wasteland of glassed sand and twisted ferrocrete. The spires of the old Manufactoria jutted from the earth like the bones of a dead titan. My augmented optics scanned the ruins. No heat signatures. No movement. Only electromagnetic static rippling through the air like whispers. Then came the distortion. A flicker in the visual feed. Something moved fast, barely visible, too fluid to be mechanical, too precise to be human. Contact. Quadrant 3. Unknown species. We pivoted instantly. My rifle's targeting cogitator tracked the blur as my finger depressed the trigger. Radium rounds hissed through the air, each one blessed to unmake flesh at a molecular level. The creature fell into view, a lithe Xenos form, carapace glinting like black glass, limbs elongated and jointed in unnatural symmetry. Its eyes burned blue with reflected data light. Another appeared. Then another. Dozens. The air filled with static and screams. My auditory dampeners activated automatically, reducing the cacophony to muffled echoes. I moved through it all like a shadow. Precise, cold, untouchable. Every shot placed perfectly. Every movement calculated by predictive subroutines. But beneath the mechanical efficiency, something stirred. It wasn't fear. Skitarii do not feel fear. It was something older. A faint pulse of awe, maybe. Or recognition. These Xenos, their movements, their unity, mirrored ours. Biological creatures acting with machine precision. The paradox infected my thoughts. For a moment I hesitated, and hesitation is sin. One of them reached me. Its claws tore across my augmetic arm, sending sparks through my vision. My body reacted automatically, servo muscles countering, blade deployed from the wrist. I plunged it through the creature's skull. Hot ichor spilled down my armor, sizzling against metal. Damage report. Left arm integrity 74%. Continue engagement. The order flashed across my HUD. I complied. We fought for hours, or minutes. Time fractures during combat. When the dust finally settled, the ground was a mosaic of corpses, Xenos and Skitarii alike. The stench of ozone, burnt metal, and alien blood merged into a single nauseating perfume. I retrieved the data core as commanded. Its surface was alive with machine runes, whispering prayers of lost knowledge. But before extraction, we discovered something else. Deep beneath the forge spire was a vault, a cathedral of metal bones and forgotten relics. Inside, a sealed container, organic, pulsing faintly with residual heat. The Mago's voice filled our minds. Retrieve it intact. Do not question. Do not question. but I did. Through the faint connection, I sensed what was inside. Not a weapon, not data, but something alive. A hybrid of machine and flesh. The kind of experiment forbidden even within the Mechanicus. And for the first time, I wanted to know more. When we returned to orbit, I was placed into stasis without debriefing. Standard protocol. The Magos and the priests oversaw the artifact's transfer in silence. But I caught fragments of their speech through the Vox interference. If it survives the integration, a new form of Skitarii. Adaptable, self-evolving, then static. In that silence, a realization struck like an electric charge through my synapses. We had not been sent to reclaim data. We had been test subjects, expendable instruments to recover something greater than us, something that could replace us. And yet as the stasis fields locked around me, I found myself untroubled. Perhaps replacement was mercy. After all, we are not meant to endure. We are meant to serve, until something better can take our place. Centuries have passed. At least, that is what the mission logs indicate. For me, time no longer holds shape or sequence. Days blend into cycles of recharge, recalibration, and redeployment. I exist within a loop, awaken, obey, execute, return. Yet somewhere deep within the data vault of my mind, the human spark, the ghost of me, still flickers. Weak, but not extinguished. At first, the loss of time was painless. The implants suppress the awareness of fatigue, of boredom, of longing. When the neural dampeners hum, emotion fades into static. I become efficient. But when the power drains low, when silence creeps between orders, the ghosts return. I remember names without faces, sounds without meaning, a woman laughing, a child's small hand gripping mine. The memory collapses before it resolves, like corrupted code. I don't know whether they were real or implanted to stabilize my loyalty. There is no rest in our kind. Sleep is an outdated biological indulgence. Instead, we enter maintenance stasis, partial shutdowns where the mind continues to calculate, looping through mission data, optimizing firing patterns, recalculating kill probabilities. Even in dormancy, we serve. The Mechanicus preaches that emotion is weakness, that the machine is purity. But I have come to doubt purity. When your flesh is replaced piece by piece, something inside you resists. A silent scream beneath the code, a feedback loop of memory and identity clashing against the programmed will to obey. During my 10th century of service, according to the archive clocks, I began to experience memory echoes. At random intervals, fragments of past missions would overlap with current reality. I would see comrades who had been dead for centuries walking beside me, whispering in binary tones. I would speak to them, respond, until the overseer Magos ordered my memory banks purged. The purge was incomplete. Some part of me resisted deletion. A small corrupted node deep in my cerebrum refused the cleansing fire. I felt the pain of the data burn, the shriek of melting code, and beneath it all I felt defiance. It was not human rebellion, not emotion. It was something purer. A will to continue existing. That was when I understood the truth of the Omnissiah's design. We are not meant to transcend humanity. We are meant to erase it, slowly, painfully, until all that remains is obedience wrapped in the illusion of purpose. The chemical sustenance that feeds my flesh now feels more like a drug than a necessity. Stimulants flood my veins in precise intervals, regulating focus, suppressing fear, maintaining vigor. Without them, my biological remnants would decay within hours. I have seen it happen to others. Their augmentations begin to corrode living tissue. Flesh sloughs away from metal like wax from a dying candle. And yet the mind continues to function, screaming silently inside a husk that no longer obeys its own commands. I fear that fate. Not death. Death is a luxury denied to us. I fear awareness, the ability to see the decay, to understand it, and to remain conscious within it. Over time, the cult rituals began to feel hollow. The canticles of the Omnissiah, once inspiring, now echo through my mind like broken code. Flesh is fallible, but ritual is eternal, they say. But what happens when the ritual becomes automatic? When the prayer is just another data packet transmitted without belief? Sometimes during combat, my targeting systems align before my thoughts do. My hands, no longer truly mine, move faster than intention. I kill before deciding to kill. The act is complete before the choice is made. That is when I know I am no longer the pilot. I am the machine. The illusion of free will is merely an artifact, a redundant process left behind by human architecture. One mission blurred into another. 1,000 dead worlds. 1,000,000 corpses catalogued, burned, purified. Each operation stripped another layer of identity. Until one day, I looked into a polished servo panel and realized I did not recognize the reflection staring back. The face was cold chrome and faint light. The eyes, twin optics glowing red, reflected no soul, only data streams. For a long time, I watched that reflection, trying to remember how it felt to blink. I no longer know whether I am loyal because I believe or because my code demands it. Perhaps it doesn't matter. Belief and programming have become indistinguishable, and yet, in the quiet hum of recharge cycles, in the flicker between operations, I still whisper an old human word, a name maybe, or a prayer. The Vox interprets it as static and the system corrects it, but the echo remains, like a scar in the machine. Maybe that is my last rebellion. There are names in the data archives, operations so precise, so devastating that they are spoken of in reverent machine cant, as if they were hymns of metal and fire. I was part of several such missions, though I no longer know if the I that remembers them is the same consciousness that lived them. Memory degrades. Neural firmware updates overwrite fragments of the self. But some memories are too deeply etched to erase. The first legendary deployment was on Vraxis 9, a planet that once shimmered with verdant jungles and oceans of methane. Now it lies dead, sterilized by our hands. The order came from the Magos biologies. Exterminate xenoorganisms. Purify the soil for reclamation. No context, no morality, just a directive and a countdown. Our drop pods entered atmosphere in coordinated silence. The hulls glowed red from re-entry, streaking across the sky like meteors of divine wrath. Inside I was calm, my heart replaced long ago by a pump that beat to the rhythm of machine time. When the impact came, I didn't feel it. I simply opened my visor, assessed the terrain, and advanced. The Xeno's resistance was swift and feral. Tall, skeletal forms with bioluminescent veins and chitin armor. My optical sensors tracked each heat signature, calculating trajectories before the first plasma bolt even fired. I remember raising my radium carbine and feeling not excitement but precision. Each pull of the trigger was an equation solved. Each kill, an answer rendered in flesh and radiation. But the most haunting memory came later, during the cleansing phase. After the enemy had fallen silent, our secondary directive activated: purge organic contamination. That included civilians, mutants, hybrids, and unregistered fauna. We advanced through their colonies, executing without hesitation. The screams were irrelevant data, noise to be filtered out, and yet, something within my human cortex still registered the sound. I archived it as interference, but it lingered long after the mission ended. My efficiency was noted. The overseeing Magos logged me as Unit 74 Omicron High Performance, near autonomous precision. They rewarded me with an ocular upgrade, a dual-spectrum lens capable of detecting radiation shifts at the atomic level. The modification blurred the line between vision and insight. I could now perceive the world in spectrums of decay and energy. seeing the hidden lifeblood of machinery itself. Years, or centuries later, came the infiltration of Serenth Theta, a forge world overrun by heretic cults. These traitor tech priests had corrupted the sacred machines with unholy code, merging demonic presence with machine intelligence. It was a violation beyond comprehension, a blasphemy of binary. We deployed in silence, moving through corridors thick with oil, blood, and incense. The air buzzed with corrupted static. I remember hearing the machine spirits whispering in agony, their binary prayers warped into screams. My mission was simple: neutralize the heretic prime, recover data cores, and cleanse the facility. It was during that mission I experienced what the Magos called tactical transcendence. My cognitive processor merged completely with the squad's data network. We ceased to be individuals. We were a single entity, a web of steel, flesh, and fury. I could feel the pulse of every rifle, the rhythm of every step. When one ranger fell, I absorbed their targeting data before their body hit the floor. We fought as one thought, one breath, one weapon. In that moment I understood perfection. Not human perfection, mechanical, cold, eternal. There was no fear, no hesitation, no emotion. Only precision and execution, and yet, when the heretic prime fell, its face a grotesque fusion of man and machine, I saw something reflected in its dying eyes. Recognition. It looked at me as if seeing itself, as if understanding what we both had become, monuments of lost humanity, worshippers of a god that devours its children in the name of progress. The Mechanicus rewarded me again. Neural reconditioning, improved subroutines, enhanced tactical autonomy. I was allowed to operate without direct oversight, becoming a Ranger Prime. My squad was a ghost unit, dispatched where silence and precision were required. We hunted rogue magi. We assassinated traitors in the dead of night. We sabotaged Xeno engines of war. Each mission stripped away another sliver of doubt. Efficiency became morality. Success became faith. There was one mission, codename Iron Requiem, that remains burned into my neural core. We were sent to intercept a traitor adept who had fled into the warp-tainted ruins of Carthion Feve. He had fused his consciousness with an ancient AI fragment, becoming something neither man nor machine. The Mechanicus declared him Heretic to be erased. Inside the ruins, time fractured. The air shimmered with psychic distortion. I felt my implants desynchronize from reality, each sensor reporting different chronologies. I watched myself walk through corridors before I entered them. My flesh, what little remained, shivered under temporal pressure. But my programming held. We found him deep beneath the ruins, surrounded by machinery that pulsed like living flesh. His voice echoed in binary and breath. You think you are pure, Skitarius? You are software in denial. You are what I am, only less aware, I fired. The round pierced his skull and detonated within. But his final words lingered, not as sound, but as code, whispered into my neural net like a virus of doubt. After the mission, I could no longer purge that echo. Sometimes, during recharge, I hear it again, buried within the static of my own thoughts. Software in denial. Perhaps he was right. Perhaps all my faith, my duty, my loyalty are merely lines of code imitating belief. But even if that's true, I will obey. Because the Omnissiah demands it. Because function is purpose. Because there is no freedom outside the network. There is only service, and so I march. Across battlefields through centuries into oblivion, an instrument of divine machinery, sharpening itself endlessly against the stone of war. Time does not pass for us as it does for mortals. It corrodes differently through circuitry, oxidized veins, and fragmented memory sectors. I do not recall my true age, only the service logs etched into my cranial databank. The oldest entry reads, Activation Cycle 003, Segmentum Solar, Status, operational. That was centuries ago, or perhaps millennia. Now degradation defines existence. My limbs, once gleaming with sacred chrome, bear the dull scars of radiation and battle. Joints whine softly as machine spirits grow weary, their maintenance rights delayed due to campaign schedules. The mechanicus calls it acceptable entropy. I call it erosion of being. Routine maintenance once brought renewal, rituals of sanctified oils, chants of restoration, binary hymns harmonized with the pulse of plasma engines. But in time, these blessings became replacements. One eye removed, another grafted in, flesh replaced by alloy, bone substituted by ceramite. Each procedure left less of the original me behind. During one repair cycle, a magos biologist examined my chest plate and declared 87% mechanical integrity. Remaining biological mass inefficient. Without ceremony, he excised what was left, lungs, stomach, portions of spine, and replaced them with efficient substitutes. I did not feel pain. Pain had long been deactivated. But somewhere in the fading data of my organic cortex, I logged the event as loss. Even our chemical sustenance becomes corrupted. The nutrient slurry fed through my intake valves once contained trace elements of glucose and protein, relics of humanity's diet. Now, it is pure synthetic fuel, carbon-neutral compounds refined in the forges of Mars. It keeps me functioning, but not alive. There is no warmth in its flow, no satisfaction in its consumption. Merely process. The degradation extends to memory. Human recollection was once fluid, emotional, non-linear. Now my thoughts resemble fragmented files. Some memories refuse to open, encrypted by decay or trauma. I remember flashes, a woman's face, perhaps a mother or sister, the sound of rainfall on a tin roof, laughter, mine possibly, then static. Sometimes I access archived combat recordings, not for nostalgia, but to test my remaining memory integrity. In one file, I see myself walking through fire, body half destroyed, voice reciting the catechism of iron. In another, I am motionless, waiting for extraction, surrounded by corpses. Watching those fragments, I wonder, am I remembering or merely reviewing data? Our biological remnants betray us before the metal does. The few cells left rebel, degenerating under exposure to radiation, chemical stimulants, and cybernetic overuse. When decay sets in, the mechanicus intervenes not with medicine but replacement. Each surgery strips another layer of identity, another biological tie to what was once me. There is a ritual performed when a Skitarii reaches critical degradation. The magos gather in silence. Incense thickens the air, mixing with sterilizing agents. As the subject lies on the slab, their remaining organic tissue is catalogued, analyzed, and incinerated. Then comes the grafting, the integration of new components blessed by the Omnissiah. They call it the renewal, but it is not renewal. It is erasure. Each upgrade promises efficiency but brings distance. My reflexes sharpen, but my memories dull. My targeting algorithms improve, but my dreams vanish. The more perfect I become, the less human I remain. There was a time when I believed the machine god rewarded faith with clarity. Now I suspect faith was simply overwritten into my firmware. Devotion is no longer choice. It is operating code. Once, during a recalibration ritual, I caught my reflection in a pool of coolant. The face that stared back was not mine. The skull was reinforced with ferroplate, half the jaw mechanical. Eyes glowed with an amber hue, constant, unblinking. There was no breath, no pulse, only motion. For a moment, something deep within me, some last remnant of soul, whispered, "You are dying." But the machine within replied, "I cannot die. I am function." Still, entropy creeps in even to perfection. Circuits corrode, software decays, the flesh rots in sealed chambers. Even the machine spirits tire. Sometimes my internal systems glitch. I see things that aren't there. Echoes of old missions, faces of fallen comrades, flashes of memory that shouldn't exist. Once, in the void between stars, during standby mode, I dreamed. That in itself was aberration. I dreamed of a field, green, endless, under the light of a yellow sun. I was walking barefoot, feeling warmth. Then, a sudden pain as my metal foot crushed the grass beneath it. I looked down, and saw no ground, only the reflection of circuitry beneath a false sky. When I awoke, diagnostics showed no anomalies. Yet I could still feel the phantom grass. That memory became my heresy, my private rebellion. Proof that some sliver of organic imperfection still lives within this metal cage. But degradation is inevitable. The Omnissiah decrees that all systems must one day return to the source. The body rusts, the mind fragments, the data fades. Even the purest circuitry will one day fail. When that time comes, they will recycle me. Strip the usable parts, melt the rest. My consciousness, if preserved, will be uploaded into the new sphere, a fragment of the collective. I will not be I will be data, function without form, code without context. And perhaps that is the final truth of the Skitarii. We were never meant to endure. We were meant to serve, until there is nothing left to serve with. And so, I continue. Step by step, gear by gear, function by function, slowly rusting toward eternity. There comes a point when battle no longer feels like battle, when the exchange of fire, the screams of dying foes and the pulse of the plasma coils blur into a continuous hum. That hum becomes life itself. For centuries that has been my reality. No victories, no defeats, only function. But beneath the metallic precision, beneath the layers of obedience and code, something faint still flickers, a whisper that questions why. I remember fragments of my earliest deployments. The first time I pulled the trigger on my radium carbine, the recoil felt alien, sharp, real. The target, a heretic insurgent, fell instantly, their body sizzling under radiation decay. I logged the kill. Efficiency, 100%. The Magos overseeing the operation transmitted a single line into my neural link. Praise be to the Omnissiah. Function achieved. Back then I accepted it. I was proud to serve. I had purpose. Now when I recall those missions, I do not feel pride. Only emptiness. Centuries of service have stripped away meaning. For every heretic eliminated, another arises. For every planet pacified, another burns. It is an endless recursion of obedience and destruction. The Imperium calls it duty. I call it entropy disguised as order. There are nights, if you can call them that, aboard the void ships, when the silence becomes unbearable. The other Skitarii sleep in stasis, their minds suspended in algorithmic stillness. I remain active. I do not know why. Perhaps a malfunction. Perhaps a subconscious need to feel something. I walk the ship's corridors in silence, listening to the pulse of engines, the whisper of coolant lines, the distant hymns of servitors. Their chants echo like prayers to a god that no longer listens. The Omnissiah is supposed to be infinite, a machine intelligence guiding all. But I have begun to wonder, what if the machine god is just as blind as we are? Once a tech priest asked me during recalibration, "Do you still dream?" I answered, "Only of silence." He nodded as if that were the correct response, then erased the conversation from my memory log. But fragments remain. They always do. It is in those fragments that doubt festers. I have seen the Imperium's glory from the inside, its shining forges, its sacred cathedrals, its endless fleets. But I have also seen its rot, the poverty of the hive worlds, the expendability of men, the worship of machinery over life. The Mechanicus teaches that flesh is weakness, but I have learned that flesh is also remembrance. It is what allows one to feel regret, compassion, love. Without it, what are we protecting? Sometimes during the aftermath of a campaign, when the smoke clears and the dead lie in heaps of melted armor, I stand among them and feel nothing. Then the emptiness becomes unbearable, and I wish I could feel horror again. That wish, too, is weakness, but it is all that reminds me I was once human. The cost of service is not death. It is duration. To live so long, stripped of emotion and identity, is to exist in perpetual penance. We are the forgotten children of the Imperium, tools that fight, bleed, and rust in silence. I recall one mission vividly. It was on a world devoured by civil war, loyalists against heretics, all human. We were deployed to purge corruption. But when the fighting was over, the corpses were indistinguishable, loyal or traitor, all reduced to ash. In that moment, I realized my weapon does not distinguish. My orders do not question. My faith does not reason. And yet, a voice deep within whispered, "Is this purity or blindness?" The Magos would call such thoughts corruption of the soulware, but I think it is something else. Perhaps the last fragment of conscience that refuses deletion. During my rare moments of rest, I sometimes look at my reflection in the polished metal of the ship's walls. My face, if it can still be called that, is half machine, half scar. The red glow of my optics hides the emptiness behind them, but when I stare long enough, I sometimes imagine seeing movement, a shadow, a flicker of a face I once knew. Was it my father? My brother? A fellow recruit? I cannot tell. Their names are gone, overwritten by serial numbers and mission codes. But I know they existed. Somewhere in my fragmented neural archives, their memory hums faintly, like an echo trying to pierce through static. Perhaps this is the true cost of service, not the loss of body or freedom, but the gradual erasure of everything that once made you alive. The Imperium calls us immortal. But immortality without identity is not life, it is stasis. There are times I envy the fallen. Those who perished quickly, before the upgrades consumed them. Their deaths had finality. Mine is an ongoing dissolution, stretched over centuries. I no longer remember how laughter feels, how fear feels, how love feels, and yet paradoxically I remember remembering them. I am haunted not by ghosts, but by absences, the shapes of things that once filled me. Still, I continue to serve, because even in doubt, duty is all I have left. My programming demands obedience, and my remaining fragments of humanity twist that obedience into justification. I tell myself I fight for the survival of mankind. I tell myself the Omnissiah's will is absolute. But deep within the hum of my circuitry, a quieter truth whispers, I fight because I do not know how to stop. And perhaps that is the final tragedy of the Skitarii, that we are not slaves by force but by design. The war never ends, because we were never built for peace. In the end, the cost of service is not measured in blood, but in the pieces of soul we surrender to the gears. That is how it always begins and ends. The faint hum of the neural core, the mechanical rhythm of the heart assist pump, the pulse of synthetic blood through carbon fiber veins. It all forms a single hymn, steady and endless, like the echo of a machine that forgot how to stop moving. The cycle of service continues. Mission, recalibration, mission, repair, mission. I do not know if years still pass. The concept of time has degraded into something abstract, measured not in rotations or orbits, but in how many times I've been reassembled from the wreckage of battle. They tell us that integration is the highest state of faith, that to surrender the self entirely to the Omnissiah is to achieve divinity. Perhaps that is true, or perhaps it is merely convenient, an excuse to erase what remains of thought. I remember the moment I realized I was no longer separate from the machine. It was during a planetary purge, one of the many nameless worlds consumed by war. My squad had been deployed to a manufacturing city overrun by heretics. The air was thick with radiation and the wail of corrupted vox chants. In the middle of the assault, my neural feed detected a breach in command frequency. Amagos had been severed by enemy fire. The command hierarchy collapsed. For the briefest instant, we were unlinked, alone, no orders, no guidance, no control, and yet I continued to move. My rifle tracked, targeted, fired. My body reacted with flawless precision. My voice, though silenced long ago, issued the litany of activation codes through a thought alone. I slaughtered the heretics, crushed their defenses, secured the perimeter. Not because I was commanded. Because I was the command. When the link was restored, the Magos commended my initiative. Full operational autonomy achieved, he said, as though I had simply reached a milestone. But I understood what it meant. I was no longer a soldier obeying commands. I had become the system that gave them. That night, as they removed fragments of shrapnel from my reinforced spine, I realized there was no longer a line between the flesh that bled and the steel that endured. I no longer needed faith. The Omnissiah did not speak to me. I was the Omnissiah's whisper. They had succeeded. Integration complete. The last fragments of what I once was. The child who dreamt beneath a polluted sky. The recruit who hesitated before the blade. The man who once feared oblivion, all dissolved into the hum of logic. I remember their faces only as sequences of numbers, stored deep in encrypted sectors of my memory I no longer access. To open them would be inefficient, unnecessary. Now, when I stand upon the battlefield, I do not think. I calculate the wind speed, the target trajectory, the radiation flux. The emotional residue of the dying no longer registers. Each movement is perfection rendered in motion. Each kill an act of worship. When the flesh fails, the machine compensates. When the mind falters, the code rewrites. When the will fractures, the purpose restores. And yet, sometimes in the quiet after combat, when the static clears and the mission ends, a faint pulse reverberates through my core, a rhythmic tremor, not unlike a heartbeat. It feels familiar. It is not emotion. It is not thought. It is something older, perhaps the ghost of what once occupied this shell, but I have learned to silence it, because within silence lies the closest thing to peace that a Skitarii can know. We do not die. We are repurposed, our data harvested, our parts reforged, our names erased. Each fragment of us becomes another cog in the grand machinery of the Imperium. The individual dissolves into the infinite. That is the promise of the machine god. That is our immortality. Sometimes I wonder, as I gaze upon the cold stars from the deck of a void ship, whether any of them remember the first light they once saw as humans, whether they too were consumed by purpose until nothing of the self remained. But then the orders arrive. The link reactivates. The data floods in. The hum rises again. I move, I kill, I serve. And within that endless rhythm of obedience, I find a strange serenity, an understanding that my humanity was not taken from me. It was simply reconfigured. If there is anything left of who I once was, it resides within that hum, echoing through the circuitry, a quiet defiance hidden within perfect obedience. We are the Skitarii. We are the instrument and the hymn. We are the storm that never sleeps. And though the flesh has been forgotten, the function endures. The Omnissiah is eternal, and so are we.